Hey everybody, I'm Dane Sanders, and I want to welcome you to Fast Track Coaching. This is our 117 or 18th episode of the show, and we've been going for over 2 years now. And this has been a labor of love for me, and a lot of reasons why is because the conversations get so rich. Oftentimes these dialogues are between me and photographers and folks within our profession, but oftentimes, at least especially lately, we've had a chance to have voices from outside our industry come in, and it's made the conversation even that much more rich, and today is no exception. For those of you who have not been to Fast Track Coaching before, it's really just meant to be a 30-minute conversation, 30, 45, depending how things roll. If you guys are engaged and it's a lot of good energy, we go a little longer sometimes, and hopefully that'll be the case today. But the point is simply for me and my guests to get in a conversation with you, and for you to not spectate but really participate. And when you do that, you get a lot of value. And the point of it is really to help push your business and your creativity just a little further this week. It's not to kind of solve all your problems, but to really consider some aspect of what we do as creative professionals, and contribute a little bit. If you get one or two nuggets out of this that you walk away with and actually do something with it, that's a home run in my book. And you do that enough weeks in a row and you'll build something special. So today, without further ado, because I don't want to waste any more time, I just want to explain logistically what we're going to do, and then I'm going to introduce my guest. If you're watching, the best way to participate is, of course, you can jump in the chat room and comment there. I see a bunch of you there already. I see Algernon and Christine and Kristen and Barbara. All you guys are all here. That's great. More people will be jumping in. In fact, tons are jumping in even as I'm speaking. But the best way isn't just to comment in there, because I don't always see those questions. The thread moves pretty quickly. If you click on the little light bulb and click text question or live question, you can actually type in your question, and we'll bring it on screen during the show. Or if you want, you can even plug in your video camera, and we can actually bring you on screen with us, which is always fun if you want to do that. But without further ado, that's the invitation. I encourage you guys to join in. I want to bring on my new friend, Cece Chapman. Cece, welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here, man.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm psyched to be here. I'm really excited about this.
That's great, man. For those of you who don't know, Cece Chapman is an author and business consultant and creative entrepreneur. He's done a ton of work with a lot of folks. Most recently, his book Content Rules that he co-wrote with Handley over at Marketing Profs has done extraordinarily well. If you look it up on Amazon, it's just kind of skyrocketing. And when I was at South by Southwest just a little while ago, he and I were twittering back and forth and trying to figure out a way to say hello. And South by Southwest is a little nutty of a place. But although I didn't see Cece, I saw his trail everywhere I looked. There was this kind of lion kind of group of fans who were like, "Where's Cece? I got to see Cece." And I saw your book everywhere, and people were carrying it. But I'm glad to finally meet you in person, man. Glad you're here.
No, likewise, man. I'm really excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this, so thank you for having me.
So I got to tell folks what happened before we were getting ready for the show, when I had my not so subtle product placement behind me. And Cece's sitting there, and he goes, "Wait a second. Oh, I know who the hell you are. I have that book in my bookshelf." And that was, and then he went and proved it to me.
Oh, wait, let me do it the way I did it, because I came back and said, "Yes, I do have your book." Yeah, no, it's one of those things that a friend of mine, Jane Quigley, who I think is tuning in today, a few months back said, "Cece, you got to buy this book. I know you'll dig it." And I bought it, and it was one of those things. I bought it, didn't really pay attention to who wrote it or anything. I just bought the book, and I've been reading it, and it's a great book, so it's hysterical to see it back there and go, "I recognize that." So it made me extra psyched to be here.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad you're here. And again, for those who don't know, maybe you could get us up a little speed on what drove you to write Content Rules, and really what it is that you do in the business realm that we could kind of get into dialogue about today, specifically around this idea of
Sure.
content development.
Yeah, so, I've been in this space a long time. I started blogging in 2002. I've been a passionate photographer my whole life, not from the business side, more just from the pure passion side. And I built my own marketing agency. I sold it. I've done consulting from, little, mom and pop stores all the way up to, HBO and Coke and American Eagle Outfitters and Discovery Channel, Shark Week, lots of different brands. And now, I wrote the book when Ann Handley approached me to co-write it with her. I was kind of hesitant a little bit because both of us kind of questioned whether the world needed another book on content. But it's one of those things that I know, Derek Sivers recently wrote a great blog post and did this video talking about how, what we think in our heads are obvious, the rest of the world thinks is brilliant. And I'm not saying our book is brilliant, but what I'm saying is that it's been really fascinating where things that I take for granted, that I just assume everybody knows and every business knows, I'm realizing more and more as we're out there doing the book tour and talking to people and seeing people's reactions and reviews, that they needed this nudge. They needed to find out that, while many of us, and I'm sure everybody out there watching this right now, understands the value of content, of creating it, especially because we've got such a, rich, content creation happening with photographers, it's just one of those things that people don't think about often enough in the business world. And the fact that, it's funny, I'll honestly say the photography chapter in the book was the hardest one for me to write, just because I was nervous, because I wanted to kind of balance the fact that, what I always say on stage is, I'm like, anybody can take a picture. Not everybody can take a photo. And there's a big difference. I know everybody watching this gets that, but when I wrote it, I was like, I don't want to piss off any of my professional photography friends, because they need to make a living. And yes, but at the same time, I wanted to tell businesses, if you're the little, spa on the corner and you don't have the money to hire a photographer, don't count out photography, So it's a balancing act, as with all content. So that's why we wrote the book, and it's been really exciting.
Well, it's funny, the reality of content creation, you're right, sometimes it feels like an afterthought. And as a photographer, and I happen to be someone who writes a little bit, but I'm always struck by how challenging it is to think well about what we do to actually get it in front of people, the ideas we have, to get it in front of people in a meaningful way that they understand. And so often, I know when I was writing these things, I was so I had these great intentions, and I would have I'm going to write in this direction. I'm going to make sure that the content is clear as a bell, and then I'd have like my wife read it, and she'd be like, "I have no idea what the hell you're talking about with this thing." And all of a sudden, I realized my intention didn't match my impact. And when those don't match, it doesn't matter. Like, the content has to deliver. And I think sometimes, especially for visual storytellers, like a lot of the folks in the audience here, they may discount the written part of content creation and kind of maybe overglorify the visual part of it. And I'm just curious, as someone who's had a chance to talk to a lot of photographers or folks who are kind of visual storyteller types, what kind of feedback do you give to those folks to kind of value content that isn't in their particular niche or genre that they have expertise in? How do you give advice in that?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, but I think one of the key things, and it's something that I realized this morning that we didn't cover as in depth in the book as I wish we had, is the fact that, good content in today's world, especially online, you have to think about all the different channels, because even if you're a photographer or you're a writer, you have, the people that are going to be consuming your content might like it in different flavors, basically, Video is great to consume sometimes, but sometimes I just want a written piece to read because I'm on the fly, or I'm not in a place that I can watch a video. So I think it's one of those things, and they are different mediums. It's really interesting when you can see someone who's highly creative, like I'm a huge, you can see behind me, Hugh Macleod has a huge influence on me because I buy way too much of his artwork, but when, he's a cartoonist, but he's embraced writing now too, and some of his blog posts and his books have been absolutely amazing, and I'm sure it must have been difficult to go from 2 or 3 words and a cartoon to having writing a full writing two bestsellers. But I think it's one of those things that you just really stop and think about. Well, how can I? If I've got a picture, let's focus on. If I've got a photo, what can I add to that with the written word or video? Or I mean, look at the stuff that Chase Jarvis creates, all the video he's creating and all the writing around his photographs. It's fascinating. And just remember, like, what is obvious to you may not be to other people. That behind the scenes stuff people crave, or telling how you set up a shot. I love that. I love hearing how shots were shot up. Not just the technical side of it, but what made you inspired to do it and those type of things.
Totally.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's so funny, that idea of what's obvious to some isn't to others. Like, I know I was when I first started writing, I would read writing teachers, and they would always say, like, good writing is simply, I think it was David Zeiser says, or I'm mixing things up, but the author who wrote about this says, ultimately all we're doing is taking good ideas, good thoughts, and putting it in a medium that people can access. And sometimes you're right, the most obvious pieces are the ones that are just out, like, why didn't I think of that? What's right there? And that, when I was reading your book, that's how I felt, was this kind of clarity of explanation that makes the content creation process just less daunting, a little less overwhelming. And I think, honestly, as I get into conversations with a lot of folks, they're just overwhelmed. And it's not about that they're not creative enough. It's just they give up before they get in the fight. And it's
not, and it's one of those things that I always tell people not to be scared of, right? I mean, content creation can be scary. We use the analogy when Ann and I present. We talk about it's kind of like making a baby. The idea sounds fun, and the practicing part's really fun. But then when you have the baby, or you start creating content, it gets really daunting and scary. But you push through the doubts, you push through the hurdles, and it's so worth it. I mean, anybody who's ever created anything, doesn't matter what medium it is, when you get that, even just one piece of reaction that's positive, or you spark something with somebody, it feels so good, right? I mean, there's nothing better than that.
It's funny, you mentioned Hugh Macleod earlier, and I think, is that his thing in the back where it says create or die?
Yeah, there's 3 of them up there. Yeah, those are all his. And then you can see I have more on the floor that I gotta still hang up. So I'm a bit of a fanboy of his.
Well, you're not alone. I think he's amazing. But it's funny because especially the Create or Die one, and I know you and I are both fans of Seth Godin and Stephen Pressfield, his new book, Do the Work, that just came out. But this whole idea of kind of overcoming that resistance, that sense of, I know I got to create this great stuff, and I look around at all these other folks that are creating great stuff, and I think that stuff's great, so I don't want to try to, be lame compared to them. Like if I was going to all of a sudden commit to creating cartoons and I'm thinking about Hugh Macleod all day long, it's going to be kind of a bad day. But to overcome and press through those resistances, what do you do when you feel that sense of stuckness and you want to overcome the resistance?
I get it all the time. I get it nonstop. I mean, it's one of those things that I think any creative, if I ever lose that feeling of self-doubt, I'm going to think I'm dead inside, because I think it's human nature to kind of be hesitant. But what I always tell myself, no matter what medium it is I just say, just Nike got it right. I say, just do it. Just get out there and do it. Whether it's, last weekend I was in New York and I was shooting a concert by the band Train, and I posted some of the pictures, and I made some comment about, I may not be Ava Blue, who's this concert photographer up in Montreal that I love. I said, but, I think I got a couple of good shots, and she literally emailed me and started yelling at me. She's like, stop it. You can do this. You took great shots. But of course, my first reaction was to self-doubt myself. So I think it's just one of those things you have to do it. I mean, writing the book, I was petrified because Anne is such a good writer. I mean, her fiction and her storytelling is so good. I was petrified to write. And then as we got going, the first time I passed something over to her, I was scared to death. And she just said, no, this is great. And we made it work. I just think it's one of those things that we have to push through it. We just, that the lizard brain, as Godin calls it, is such an evil voice in your head going, you're going to fail. But I guess it's one of those things that the way I've always told people about it is, I'm like, listen, if you're passionate about it and if you're enjoying doing it, then other people are going to connect to that. They're going to see it. They're going to connect with it. Whether they like it or not is another whole story. But I always tell people, create for yourself first, and then if other people react to it, it's just the icing on the cake. And I think the thing with the internet is that we're really blessed that we can get in front of so many more people than we could in the past. So the chances of running into people who do like your stuff is much, much greater. But of course, we compare ourselves to other people that we respect and all those things. And it's I always strive. I'm like, God, if I could get to this level, I'd be much happier. But I think we always need that, because that inspires us to do better, right?
Well, it's funny. You yesterday I was reading your blog, and I was you put that post about you going to your buddy's place after you saw the behind the scenes at the TED Talks, and I watched the clip, and I have crazy dreams of thinking of those great people and what the contributions they've made to shift the tides in our world. And same kind of deal. Like the temptation is to go, they're just awesome, and I'm going to be lame. And it reminds me a little bit. Actually, my friend Tamara Lackey, who's in the chat room, she mentioned trying to be perfect, or trying to perfect your content definitely can get in the way. And do you struggle with that sense of perfectionism too? And again, if so, how do you knock that in the teeth?
It depends. It depends on what I'm doing. Like when it comes to my blogging, I've always treated much more stream of conscious, just kind of write it and put it out there. So I've never worried about that, and I have people correct my grammar all the time, which cracks me up. But sometimes I do. I mean, like, I know the other day when I was, I'm brand new to using Lightroom I was using Aperture before, and I still don't know what the heck I'm doing with it. And so I had some photographer commented on something I did, and she goes, "Here's how you can do it better." And of course, my first instinct was to go back and do it to all my photos. And then I said, you know what? No, stop. I'm gonna wait, and my next batch of photos I'll do better, because I was comfortable with the ones that I had done already, and I could have gone back. And I said, you know what? It's good enough. It's not like it's going to change the world if they're better, and so I always try to think, is it good enough to ship? Put it out there. You can always go back and change it if you have to. If you really, really need to, you can go back and change it. I know I had a client one time that I shot a picture of. I was not shooting photography for this client. I was doing social media for them, but I went to an event and I shot a picture of one of their bands. And they ended up putting the photo in Rolling Stone for a full-page ad, and all I could think of was like, "This photo's not that good. What the heck?" And I was freaking out. But the band. But then the mom of the band called me up and thanked me profusely, for taking a picture of her little boy and it being in Rolling Stone. And I said, "You know what? If the moms forget it. I don't need to worry anymore." But I was freaking out. I mean, Metallica's on the cover, and I've got a photo inside that's not quite good enough in my mind. So, but you just embrace it.
Yeah, I like that. It's interesting too. Like this idea of failure. I'm really struck by it's actually the rabbit trail I took the other day when I went to your website. Found myself at TED again, wandering around watching all these little clips. And I saw that a recent talk by the guy who started the Khan Academy. And the Khan Academy, if you don't know, is this kind of revolutionizing way to train, educate K through 12. And he's trying to revolutionize the whole education system. And if you guys have ever seen it, it's KHANacademy.com. It's amazing. But one of the things he says is that the way that classrooms are set up nowadays, traditionally here in the U.S. and Canada too, that's where I went to school, are such that you go to the boring part. You have to go to the boring part, which is a classroom where someone is talking at you, and you have to be quiet and just listen and learn one kind of way. And then you go home and do the important work at homework with people who don't really know what they're doing, parents, and it truncates real learning and actually real creativity, because there isn't enough space for people to intentionally mess up to really get rewarded for messing up, because they're en route to getting somewhere further along. And even as you're describing that Lightroom example, I actually think it's pretty perfect to not go back, but to actually have memorializations of all of the different stages and improvements that people make along the way, whether that be in way back when or some of my early drafts of stuff I've done. Certainly my images, they're horrible at the beginning. And actually, when I hold those juxtaposed against my current work, I feel less crappy. And
it makes you feel great, doesn't it? Because you can see the progress of, wow, I kind of do know what I'm doing now. Yep.
Well, I don't know if I go that far, but I'm moving in the right direction. And I think, I don't know, that this need to fail. Well, actually, let's just turn the corner. I want to talk a little bit about, if you were to give us a little bit of a synopsis of content rules and kind of how you direct people to go ahead and actually create content, especially if they're listening to this, they're sitting there going, okay, this is all great for other people, but I'm not even sure I even envision myself as a content creator or a publisher. If you've convinced them that, yeah, it's important, what are the first things that you encourage them to do to start making headway with their own content creation?
Yeah, so in the book we laid out 11 what we call content rules, and we put rules in quote marks because they're more about guidelines and thought processes, and and they're pretty straightforward. But one of the first things we tell people to do is to play to your strengths. Not everybody has. Like I saw someone in the chat room talking about video being difficult for them. Editing video is horrible for me. It's one of those things that I love doing video, but it's not a strength. So one of the first things we tell people to do is to play to their strengths. If you're a photographer, focus on creating photographic content, or written, or and don't forget the other things too. There's email newsletters, and there's webinars, and there's things like this and events. There's a lot more to than just everybody seems to think it's like writing, pictures, video, and that's it. So play to your strengths. But then we also lay out things like, be human. Talk the way that you talk. Don't, too many. This is harder. This is something bigger for big brands. They always think they have to speak in PR terms and legalese, and nobody likes that stuff. So we encourage people to start, when they're creating their content, to think that way. Be realistic. Be human. Be real. Be whoever you are. And if you're in a brand situation, obviously figure out what the voice of the brand is. But when it's just you, focus on what you love doing. Don't try to be anybody that you're not. I mean, it's one of those things, I'm sitting here in Boston in t-shirt and shorts. Should I have put on a collared shirt to look more professional today? Maybe, but I also know this is who I am. And I think that's one of the things that makes content, whatever medium you're creating it on, great, is when you, the creator, shine through in that content, when they start to get to know you through your content. That, nothing makes me happier than when somebody says, I knew that was one of your photos when I saw it, because it's, you. And I was like, I still don't know what that means, but it makes me feel good.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that you're doing right now is you're kind of blowing up old paradigms. You're saying, gosh, these big buckets of, just visual, just books, just video, that there's a lot more nuance now, and there's a lot more available to get involved. Because it's kind of like, I remember a long time ago I ran a marathon, and when I was down, I was like, marathons are painful. I don't want to do these again. But I met all these writers or these runners, and some would run 10Ks and 5Ks, and they'd specialize in half marathons or full marathons. And all of a sudden I realized, like, running wasn't just you have to do the Ironman. Running could be a lot of different things. And the same way, like this, it's kind of the day of the ebook now, and newsletters and posts, and even commentary and threads, and putting a thoughtful response to somebody else's lead. To do that, to create that content in a way that causes people to pause, that's an art form. I mean, 140 characters is an art form if you do it well.
It is. Again, it is.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I was glad you mentioned things like email and curation of content, and because, I use Google Reader a lot, and I share a lot, and a lot of what people reshare of mine is stuff that I saw, I liked, and I shared and left a comment on, through something like Google or whatever reader you're using. But it's not like I created the content. I'm just sharing my reaction to it. And it's maybe something, it might be a sentence, might be a couple of words, but people seem to resonate with that because I've become a filter for some things, and there's no reason that a company can't become a filter for information on their vertical. It's one of the things I always tell people, like, if you're stuck on content, you can't create it, once a week, curate the top 5 stories that you think your customers might be interested in. That can be anything. And it might be video one week, and it might be text the next. I mean, who knows? There's, like you said, there's endless possibilities of content right now.
Now, that's interesting to me. So, when you think about content creation, you would include curation as part of that process, as something that, like, the people who are being the filters, as a pretty important part of the biosphere or the ecosystem of content creators. That's cool. Yeah,
without a doubt, because I think curation's something that gets overlooked quite a bit, and it's amazing, because let's face it, if I'm working in retail, for instance, or even photography, the top 5 stories that caught your attention this week. That's 5 links that somebody else didn't have to go through 100 to find. So it's a very powerful way for any vertical, for any company to get on somebody's radar.
Well, I mean, on some level, that reminds me a lot of guys like Guy Kawasaki and what he did with his online magazine rack thing. It just seemed like basically what he was doing, he was curating, but he's also a writer, and he's somewhat he's trying to use as many channels as possible to create value. I mean, it's just this constant contribution of value. So on some level, is that what you're saying? That if you're going to create content, it's not just about original works. It's about if you can create works or distill works or filter works or combine works.
Yeah, and that may not be. Yeah, it definitely adds. I'm not saying that you have to do that. I'm already out there reading the web every day anyways. So if I can share some value just by clicking a little share button in Google Reader, then that's awesome. When I look at the numbers of people who follow me on, like, Google Reader, I mean, it's last time I checked, it was more than the subscribers of my blog. So I'm like, what does that say? I don't know. Maybe my content's not as good, or I don't know. But I don't really pay attention to the numbers too closely. But it fascinates me. I'm like, okay, and I mean, it doesn't. I don't think about it. Because I share everything. It might be a movie trailer. It might be a piece of fiction. Who knows? It could be a little bit of everything because I share whatever I'm interested in.
Yeah, well, it's funny. You actually remind me of another friend who's on the show today. His name is Chris Becker. He's an amazing photographer here in Orange County, and Becker, he's that kind of way too, where he's basically a professional poker player, and he happens to be a professional photographer. And
nice.
Happen to really like baseball and professional television. So he's commenting about all these things, and that's why he has this massive following. Is people, they like all of it. It's all valuable content that's getting created. But I have a question that Gloria brought up here that I want to bring on screen. She said, I teach my clients to multi-purpose their content. Curation is a great buzzword. But this idea of multi-purposing content, do you find yourself doing that where you write something in one area and then purpose that or retool it in a number of other fronts? And I'm wondering if you have any examples of that. Do you ever do that sort of thing?
Yes, I do it. I do it quite a bit where I do a podcast called Managing the Gray, where it focuses kind of on, it's that do better in life, motivational improvement type of podcast. And I do a lot of where I might write something, or when I do recording, I sit down right here and I fire up the microphone and I just record top of mind. Quite often an idea that comes out of that will repurpose itself into a blog post, or it's actually sort of repurposing itself into a book at the moment. But I think there's a lot that, or I know when I go on, since now I'm doing more travel writing and whatnot, when I'm out taking pictures, like I just went to New Orleans and I'm writing up my review of New Orleans right now, but as I'm taking the photos, I'm thinking, how is this going to fit into my post when I write it up? What kind of shot do I need here? And I'm just talking about going to a restaurant and, I got to make sure I get a picture of the restaurant as opposed to just shooting my meal or whatever. So I'm always thinking about, in the book we call it reimagining, not recycling. It's one of our rules, where it's not just I'm going to take this audio and make a transcript of it, but I'm going to take this audio and maybe I'm going to turn it into a video, or I'm going to do photos, or I'm going to make a slideshow of my photos from an event, or it's reimagining the content. So I think it's something that not enough people do. They just think, I'll take this and I'll throw it on every channel imaginable and that'll solve all the problem, rather than figuring out, what can I do with this now to do something cool and different?
I love that, because it's almost like it's like an evolution of the content more than it is a just kind of recycling of it. That I think is
exactly.
Exactly. Kind of, retooling. It's funny. Well, this leads to another question. Kristen Schuler asked the question: do you ever find that mixing content ideas, and I would kind of read into this, having ideas evolve, could confuse reader on what you're all about? Does that ever show up for you?
I'm laughing. I'm laughing because I am a confusing individual. I was one of the first music podcasters, so I had this whole world who knew me as the indie music guy. Then I built a marketing agency, so suddenly I was the marketing guy. Photography's always been there. Yes, it can definitely confuse people about what you're all about, but at the same time, I think far too often everybody's worried about being stuck, worrying about fitting in one bucket. And I did a whole presentation where I was like, forget the buckets, I mean, I have a dad blog. Am I a daddy blogger? Yeah, some days, but I'm not defined by that. So I think don't get too hung up on the fact of, if you're creating content, like nobody's ever called me a travel writer, and I'm not that, but I love writing about travel, and I'm doing some trips more, so that's going to become another piece of me. But yes, it's easier if you can be clearly defined as, oh, he or she is this. That makes life a lot easier, because you can say, this is what I do. But I just know most creative people can't settle for one thing. They like to do multiple things, right? They like to have their multiple irons, and I'm always sticking new things in the iron, unfortunately. But I just think it's the nature of the beast. If you have any creativity or entrepreneurial spirit in you, you're always doing more than one thing. So it's so hard to define us.
Yeah. Well, and I get Kristen's attention and Kristen's question, because there is a sense from a purely marketing branding perspective, wanting to have a clean kind of package that people can wrap their arms around and go, yeah, I get this person. But there's also this tension of, you also need to, if you're going to stay interesting, you need to have an edge to you that's kind of progressing, and people are a little curious, and there's a mystery to it. And I think I think what you're saying is really accurate. Ultimately, if you're true to yourself and you happen to be a creative person, well, you kind of don't really have another option but to keep creating content in new directions. But I want to keep this thing rolling because there's a number of folks asking you questions. One is the guy I just mentioned earlier, Chris Becker. He signed on as Twitter user, but he wrote the question, "Hey CC, how do you organize your thoughts? I have tons of ideas and I don't know how to proceed." And I know where he's going with this, where you get overwhelmed with 1,000 ideas that you think you want to move on, but how do you wait it out and decide what's going to get your attention?
Old school, baby. Notebooks. I always have, this is my field notes notebook. I probably have 50 of them sitting on a shelf up here above me. Yeah, there you go. You have to, I am constantly writing down ideas, and I know Julien Smith is the one who taught me to always carry a notebook, and I do, because I'll be in the car and be like, ugh! And I've been known to throw recordings into, I also use Evernote a lot on my phone, so that way I can just take pictures or throw an idea at it, whether it's voice recording or a picture. I have so, and it is tough because I have so many ideas and not enough time, not enough money to do most of them, and it's one of those. It's difficult, right? But I think it's a curse I will gladly live with, because I love having the ideas, and I think that's one of the reasons why I think reading the new book, Do the Work, hit home for me, because I've had this one idea bouncing around in my head for the longest time, and I read that book and went, uh-oh, now I gotta do it. It was like, no, stop it. But it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. Yeah, but Evernote, if no one's ever used Evernote before, I would gladly be a paid spokesperson, but I'm not. I just love the tool and it works across all platforms, all cell phones, my iPad, so any device I'm on, all my ideas are there, and it's such a cool little virtual tool that I would pay much more money for it than I do, because it's free. But it's just one of those things where wherever I am, I can take a picture of something that captures my attention, and I use it for all sorts of things.
Well, it's funny what you said about the Steve Pressfield Do the Workbook. I've actually recommended that to a lot of folks, and I'm into it. And his War of Art really actually ruined me pretty good.
I've never read that book. I'd never heard of him before.
Really? Oh,
yeah, I'd never heard. But I have to go after reading that. It was funny. I actually read Do the Work while waiting to pick up my mom from Easter Mass on Sunday. I was sitting reading it because I was early, and I loved it. I loved the guys. I loved it, but I hadn't read that book, so now I'm kind of scared to read it.
Well, you might not want to read it. Honestly, it's one of those things that I recommend it kind of openly to everybody, but now I'm going to actually think it through more and give people a proper warning that if you end up reading either of those books, you're kind of don't plan on doing anything else for the next 3 months, because whatever that one project that was looming, that's what you're going to end up doing. But you're going to talk about it in 3 months.
I always love giving that warning where I'm like, this is like whenever I give somebody ignore everybody, I'm like, this is dangerous. You may not want to read it. Or The Dip. I mean, The Dip made me quit a job when I read it. I'm going to quit a job and start a new agency as I'm buying a new house. But those books, while they're dangerous, I think they're also the most fun, right?
Wiley's been awesome. They've been super awesome. They kick you, right?
And I plan on doing at least one more book with them, if not more. But at the same time, I'm watching my friends self-publish books, and I'm watching them pocket all the money that they're selling it on, and I go, wait, I know how many nickels I'm getting when I sell a copy of my book as opposed to how many they're getting, and it's drastically different.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really pointing to an even a larger question of like content ownership. And if I'm going to go to all this work, whether it be written or visual, the idea of giving away license rights to all my images, I don't even think about it. I don't do that. But when it comes to my written work, I've gone twice with Random House, and I love they were a great experience. But I don't really own these books anymore. Like Random House owns these books, and right. I wrote it, but I kind of that's what they are. And there's a sense in which I wonder if the evolution of the industry is moving in a direction. And I don't say this to disparage Random House. I think that the future of big publishers will have to shift. But at the same time, I look at it and I go, gosh, how much do writers and content producers do we want to retain that ownership of what we're creating? Or is the trade worth it enough to have that experience of walking into a Borders and there's your book and it feels great?
Yeah, and that's what I think is going to be. That's why I think it's really interesting what Seth Godin and the Domino Project are doing, where they're kind of testing the waters to say, can you, and granted, he has the partnership of Amazon, so it's not quite testing the waters too much, but it is. Well, it's an interesting concept.
Done 12 bestsellers in a row, many of which are still in the top 100. So he hedged his bet a little bit. But I'm with you.
And can I just say?
Yeah.
Can I just tell you, it was a personal high when I saw my book above a Seth Godin book, because I was like, "That's wrong. That should not be happening." We never knocked Gladwell out of #1. We got as high as #2 in marketing, but the tipping point was always right above us, and I always kind of laughed because I was like, "I'm all right with that," because that's a great book. But even just for a minute, seeing me above Linchpin messed me up forever. I was like, that's insane.
Well, okay. If we're gonna do true confessions, you know how Amazon, they update their ratings every hour or whatever.
Every hour.
So one late night when I was up doing something or other, I'm jumping on Amazon, vainly looking at where my book was, and for whatever reason, there's a little spike in acquisitions, and all of a sudden I'm like calling my mom saying, if we both buy right now, we might bump, and I'm going to take a screenshot of this right now so I can show where we stand. And the vanity is ridiculous, but it's good fun. And honestly, dude, what you created is pretty phenomenal. I do hope folks who are watching this get a chance to get out there and pick it up. I know, and it's co-written both with you and Anne and Handley over at Marketing Profs, and you guys are prolific in your constant contribution and giving back to folks. Even the other stuff that you're doing, the digitaldads.com, totally worth checking out if you're a dad out there, and especially if you're a geeky dad, you're going to love this place. But just number one, before I go any further, I just want to say thank you again for all that you're doing, just for small business owners who are trying to move forward creatively. And this idea about content, it wasn't as obvious as you think, and a lot of folks are going to benefit and are benefiting from it, and that's why you're seeing such tremendous success with the book. So congratulations with that, and I can't thank you enough again for being on the show today.
Well, thanks for thank you for having me. I mean, it was very cool to be here. It was fun to put the two things together with your book, and I know the friend that recommended the book has been, she's on, I can see she's paying it, she's on here because Jane Quigley's down there talking on the chat room, I can see, which is because I emailed her as soon as we talked and said, you gotta come on this, I'm talking to this guy with the book you love, it's awesome. So no, it was fun to be here, and I do think, I mean, for any small business owner, one of the neat things is the internet does kind of level the playing field for you. I mean, there's nothing preventing you from getting your message out there, and I think through creating really engaging content that's right for you and right for your customers is a great way for any small business in any vertical to get out there and get exposure and new customers online. I think it's the one thing that we can all do.
Awesome. Hey, this as I'm looking at this, we went a little long, but I'd love to have you back again sometime, and I know that's what people are crying out for in the chat room. A lot of folks are like, this is overall quickly, and they want you back. So I love to ask people on public record, is there any chance we could get you back again someday? Because we'd love to.
I would love to come back into the team where this software. When you brought up the question and the dual screen, I've never seen anything like that. I took a screenshot of that because I was like, "That's cool." No, so this is no. I would be more than happy to come back anytime and talk about whatever.
Can't thank you enough, CC, and we'll talk to you all real soon.